It's the Big Ten championship going down at Lucas Oil Stadium. It's going down Saturday, 8 p.m. This will be our nightcap, and that's 8 p.m. Eastern, by the way. The Penn State Nittany Lions, of course, are facing off against the Oregon Ducks. Uh, this was not the matchup that everybody had penciled in here a couple of weeks ago. Obviously, Ohio State takes their fourth loss in a row to Michigan in a big surprise upset that allowed Penn State at 11-1. They had that lone loss to Ohio State at home there, and it gave them the nod to be able to go to Indy and face off with the Ducks here. We talked about this game some on Sunday and kind of had talked about we were trying to come up with ways in which we felt like Penn State would be able to compete and win this game. The spread is not one that's just out of this world. I mean, it's 3.5 for Oregon here. Over under is set at 49.5 in this game. One of the things I said Sunday that I really needed to go in and take a deeper look at, I had to kind of pull up some of the advanced stats. And what I'll do for you guys right now is I'm going to I'll put some of the stats on the screen here as we go through this stuff. So you're more than welcome to kind of take a look at some of this stuff as we go through. I'll actually come back to that slide. These are the ones that I kind of wanted to reference. As you can see on the left there, that's going to be Penn State's offense versus Oregon's defense. And then on the right, that'll be Penn State's defense against Oregon's offense. So, and these are rankings, obviously, so you can kind of take a look at that at your pleasure. I mean, neither one of these teams has an outlier as far as, just something that is really just terrible, right? Oregon offensively, rush yards per game, they're 63rd in the country. That's kind of the biggest outlier on this page, right? So, and 63rd, I mean, that's middle of the pack. That's average. So, and not to mention, there was a point in the season where there was kind of a lull in that production for Oregon. I feel like the running game has kind of came on late in the season here. So there's not a ton of stats to dislike from either one of these teams. So therefore, I wanted to dig a little deeper. I wanted to look at how these teams responded to explosive plays. How do these teams on offense, how do they go about getting their explosive plays? I wanted to kind of look at some of that and of course, like turnovers and things. So I'll kind of go through some of those stats and read them off to you. Sacks allowed, both of these teams are really good. I don't think there's necessarily a liability here for either one of these offensive lines. Penn State, 7th in the country, have not allowed a lot of sacks. Oregon, 13th in the country. So both of them look really, really good in that aspect. Offensively, I looked at explosive rush plays, right? Rush plays of 10-plus yards. Offensively, Penn State's 25th in the country. They have 73 rush plays of 10-plus yards. That's the most productive side of their offense as far as hitting the explosive plays. And again, as I said, those explosive run plays are plays of 10-plus yards. And Penn State's hit 73 of those bad boys. And Oregon, on the other hand, is 61st in the country and has hit 62 of them. So you can kind of see a little bit of difference there. Passing plays of 20-plus yards, Penn State 35th. Passing plays of 20-plus yards for Oregon, 40th. So I was a little bit surprised to see that Penn State on paper has been more explosive than Oregon has this season, and that's in the passing game, and that is in the rushing game as well. And that was something that did surprise me a bit. But as we've said this year, Penn State has generated a ton of yards. They just haven't necessarily turned those all into points, that in the big games, I guess I should say. And they haven't had a ton of big games, but Ohio State, namely, they didn't score an offensive touchdown. And so that's kind of what I'm talking about here. Defensively for both of these teams, both of them are really good at getting sacks, Mason. 27th in the country for Penn State in sacks, 6th in the country for Oregon. Both of them can get after the quarterback. That's one of the biggest matchups here. Which one of these defenses is going to be able to get pressure on the other's quarterback? Like I said, both offensive lines are good. What gives here? That's going to be a big point of contention in this football game and depicting who's going to be the winner and who's going to be the loser here. Um, and then turnovers, Penn State, 55th in the country of turnovers caused with 17. 12 of those have been interceptions. So Penn State's been pretty good at picking off passes. And Oregon, 67th in the country, turnovers caused. That's 10 interceptions, 6 fumble recoveries. So kind of middle of the pack for both teams as far as creating turnovers this year. Um, there's just not a lot of chinks in this armor, Mason. I mean, both teams look good. It just one team looks elite in one category, and the other looks at least good or really good. The margins are very thin as far as statistically. Now let's go back and look at some of the teams that these teams have played here. Okay, and for Penn State, I think that's super important. West Virginia, Bowling Green, Kent State, Illinois. That's kind of an outlier. Illinois is a pretty good matchup. UCLA, USC, Wisconsin, Ohio State, obviously an outlier there. So you got Illinois, Ohio State, right? Washington, Purdue, Minnesota, Maryland. There's only like a couple of games there where you feel like that was a huge matchup, a really big game or a good win or a good loss. I mean, Penn State only lost to Ohio State by 7. So you got to be happy with how the defense played that day. The offense just couldn't do a darn thing. I don't know, Mason. What are your thoughts here? I kind of dressed out some of the things that I wanted to kind of dress out. I feel like this is going to be a close football game. There's a reason that Vegas has got it 3.5, and they're not just making that number up. They don't build these big buildings and casinos in the desert for free. They're making lots of money. I can't pick Penn State to cover this. I just can't. I've watched these teams this year. The statistics are telling me that this is going to be a close game, but is it going to be like a field goal close game, or is it a touchdown? Because early in the week when we talked about this, I felt like Oregon should have been a touchdown favorite. So I was surprised whenever it was 3.5. What are your thoughts on this game going into it for the Big Ten championship?
Well, looking at a few players here, I've kind of highlighted a couple that I think are kind of catalysts for each program. For Oregon on the offensive side of the football, I think it's Tez Johnson, right? He comes back. The offense has another gear to it. I said last week that I think I took the under in Oregon's game last week, and I mentioned that the offense just seemed to be missing a gear. Well, that gear was Tez Johnson, right? And he comes back, and when you go in and you look at his production and how the offense scores with him in versus with him not in, it's pretty significant. So him being able to play in this football game, I think, is huge. You can just watch the offense without knowing any of the stats or looking them up. Just watch the offense and tell me that having 15 in there doesn't make a difference, right? Tez Johnson is an absolute playmaker. For Penn State on the offensive side, obviously that guy's Tyler Warren. He is an absolute dude. We questioned going into this offseason who is going to be the playmaker going into this season. And we really didn't have an answer until the USC game when Tyler Warren really emerged and planted himself in this offense. I mean, we knew that he would be a good tight end, but sometimes a good tight end is good for 400 yards and 4 touchdowns on the year, and that's a solid performance by a tight end. Tyler Warren is so much more than that, and everybody knows it at this point, but he's got to be featured in this game plan, and I'm curious to see what Kotelnicki he draws up, knowing that you've got Dan Lanning on the other side of the football with tons of dudes on the defensive front and just on the defense in general. He's going to be scheming up ways to get to keep Tyler Warren out of this game plan for Penn State. Does Penn State try to get cute and go away from Tyler Warren, essentially using him as a decoy? Or are they able to find ways to get him the football? And I think that the latter is obviously the path to success and the path to a win for Penn State. But I'm going to be really, really excited to see that sort of matchup. How does Oregon defend Tyler Warren, knowing that that one dude could be the reason you lose this football game? On the defensive sides for Oregon, we'll start with Oregon. Um, the catalyst for me is Mateo Uyunglele. He leads the team with sacks, with 10.5 sacks, which is good for seventh in the country. I think some of his sacks have really kind of gone under the radar. I mean, we know what kind of player he is. We know he's good. He's a big guy. He's good against the run. And now he's put together the sacks. He's not just putting pressure on the quarterback. He's getting to the quarterback. And what's interesting about Drew Aller is that no quarterback is better under pressure. I'm not saying that, but Drew Aller is good in comparison to other quarterbacks when put under pressure, if that makes sense. How does he handle it in this game? Can he get? Can he complete? I would think 50% of his passes under pressure. That's a pretty good metric. So if he can hit that number or exceed that, I would say it's a successful day for him. But if going back to Mateo Uyunglele and this Oregon defensive front, Jordan Burch should be playing in this game. By the way, I think that Oregon has kind of limited him, knowing that they've got potentially a 16 or 17 game season this year. I think he's going to be ready. We questioned his health status earlier in the season, and then he comes back and I forget which game it was, but he comes back into that game, and then he's like catching a fake punt and running it 50 yards down the field. The guy's healthy, right? I think he's on a bit of a pitch count, or has been. I think he's going to be a full go in this game, and that's huge for this Oregon defensive line that's going to be really tasked with stopping the run for Penn State, because it's been the running game for Penn State has been pretty good. By their standards, it's been pretty good. The difference for Penn State in the offense is that the passing game has now picked up, and they're getting more explosive in the passing game. Featuring guys like Tyler Warren. So really like the defensive front for Oregon. Tuiotti's another guy who's up there. He's been creating pressure as well. How does Penn State block that front? I don't think that they can do it, and sustain it throughout the entire game. But in key situations, in key passing downs, when the defensive line is pinning their ears back, can they give Drew Aller just a little bit of time to find those receivers downfield? And then obviously those receivers got to get open. But then on Penn State side on defense, to me it's Abdul Carter. I mean, the guy's been solid. 10 sacks on the season so far, which is good for 11th in the country. I actually like Dylan Gabriel when he's under pressure as well. He's a guy who can escape, doesn't have a particularly powerful arm necessarily, but is a guy who can create space with his legs, and then find a receiver downfield. I think you're going to see a lot of the intermediate stuff from Oregon, and also you're going to see a different Oregon offense than you've seen throughout most of the season. I think that they have been holding back, playing a little bit vanilla against an easier Big Ten schedule, I think, than they maybe thought it would be going into the season. But I think that the Oregon offense has kept things a little bit vanilla, and then this is the game where they should be able to kind of pull out all the bags of tricks to some degree until they get up, or if they get up. And then win this football game in ways that they haven't had to do yet. But Abdul Carter up front, like you said, Bark, the pressure on the quarterback, I think, is going to be the deciding factor for who wins this football game. And to me, I like Oregon up front a little bit more. I think that they have a few more dudes. Danny Deni Sutton, he's come back now, and he's a game wrecker too. But how healthy is he? He's a guy who I kind of question a little bit more on the defensive line. Whereas I think that I guess on the flip side for Oregon, I think Jordan Burch is completely healthy. Danny Deni Sutton, I'm not exactly sure if he's 100% or not. But that being said, Mark, I'll let you start off. What's your prediction? Is there anything else that you want to add first of all, and then what's your prediction on this one?
Yeah, man. I like Oregon in this one. I can't look. Here's the deal. I can't bet for Penn State in this situation. They haven't converted in a big game in a long time, man. And I can't. I got to see it. I've got to see it happen. This whole Franklin era at Penn State has been a lot of moments of build up and build up and build up, and then disappointment in the big game. And they've been close, but no cigar. I can't pick Penn State here until I actually see it happen. Give me Oregon. They've been one of the most consistent teams in the country. There's no reason for me to not keep going with Oregon and ride that wagon. If Oregon is losing a game, it's going to be against one of the premier teams in the country this year. I don't think Penn State is necessarily that. It's been a good year for Penn State. 11-1 is an outstanding regular season and something to hang your hat on for sure. But I don't think the playmakers are there for Penn State in this game out wide, and I think Oregon has got the playmakers in spades here, and have got a clear advantage as far as that goes. So, barring some dumb decisions, we've seen analytics and coaches get in the way, right, of their own teams in some big games over the last couple of years, and Dan Lanning has not been excluded from that, Mason. So Dan Lanning is going to have to. There's no need to risk. There's no need to risk it, right? This is not a risk it to get the biscuit type scenario here. Oregon has got the upper hand. Play this game straight up. Play good special teams. Flip the field whenever you get an opportunity, and take your three whenever you get an opportunity. And I think Oregon is able to win this one, no problem.
Yeah, going back to the line of scrimmage here, because I do think that it's worth mentioning over and over again. Penn State and Tom Allen have been really good at drawing up pressure throughout the season, right? Oregon has gotten pressure without blitzing. And I think that that's the difference in these two different styles of defense. Oregon does it rushing 3 or 4. And, can they do that against Penn State's offensive line? To be determined. But my point is they've got dudes that whether they're really scheming up a pass rush and a blitz package or not, they can get to the quarterback. I think that that's the difference in this football game. I like it close, but not as close as the spread is showing here. I like Oregon by about 6 points. I think that they have to work for this one. I think it's lower scoring. I got the under here as well. I'm thinking that this one ends up around 45. And so I guess in that case, give me 20. I guess I would say 29 to 15, something like that. I'm not doing math that well right now, Mark, but I'm thinking, long story short, I'm thinking that Oregon's going to be able to win this one by about 6 to 10 points, somewhere in that area.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm thinking probably 31-20, something like that. I think this one is going to be right there around that 50-point mark. We'll see. Y'all let me know in the comment section what you think is going down in this one, and let me know if you think the over or the under is hitting in this one. I'm pretty interested in that. We'll have a betting show later this week, and we'll kind of talk about that.